It's 11:30, so tuned in and listening. I wonder if somebody could write a comment to let me know that the stream's gone live, and then we'll get underway. Live from the Hive, it says. It's live now, CS 180. That sounds good. All right. Look, guys, welcome to, I guess it's a bit of a trial today. We're doing a live stream. I don't need to tell you that because you've logged on. We're down doing what we would normally do with our kids as part of our kitchen garden program. And today we're going to look into a beehive. We're going to do a bee inspection. We're going to look at this hive just here, which is one of our original hives here. So those of you that don't know the history, this program has come out of a project that the kids at our school did, working with the PNC and working with Glencore. Received a grant and we built a hive. Since then, our apiary has expanded to 2 hives, and these little boxes beside the main hives here are called nuke boxes, and I'll explain a little bit later what's inside those ones. But I want to introduce Sheridan. Sheridan's over here. She's going to, camera lady, she's going to hold the camera, and we'll get started. So can you see everything there?
I can.
Okay, hi. So before we get underway, a couple of things to know, and I know our kids are really well versed in this. Miss Durie, it's her first time down in the beehive, and as you can see, we've suited up and we're nice and safe. It's not all the time necessary to be in such a highly protective bit of gear, but because we're making sure that we want to be nice and calm and not at a worry, we're fully suited up. We've got our bee suit on. I'm about to put my veil on. Got our smoker over here, which has probably gone out, so I might have to light that again, and we'll get into our beehive here. For those of you that are at home that are our kids, they'll know that our hive is made up of 2 compartments. We've got a box down here which is a brood box, which is where our queen lives and lays all of her eggs and raises her babies. So the word that we use for baby bees is brood, so we call this the brood box. This box here, which is above an excluder, fancy word for, I guess, a gate that only allows certain bees through, is our honey super. So this box here is kind of like a pantry for the bees, and it's where they can store excess honey. So we're going to move that one out of the way, because today the goal of what we want to do is to check on how our queen is going and whether or not they've got adequate stores of pollen and nectar. So we're going to skip that one right away, and we're going to go down there and check out how they're going. But as you can see, one of the most important tools in this process is the bee smoker, which has clearly gone out. So I'm going to light it again, and we won't be long. For those of you that are listening, and if you had any questions as we went along, be sure to write them in the comments there, and we'll get to them when we can. But definitely at the end we'll take a breath and get those questions ready. We miss you guys, and we hope that you're all being well and safe at home, and this is, I guess, a way of bringing some normality back to your day. Wednesdays, as you guys know, is one of our favourite at Millfield Public School because it is our kitchen garden day. So although it's not the same as being here, we hope that this can help you guys at home. So Miss Durie asked just before why we have a bee smoker. I wonder if, Sheridan, you want to talk on the camera and let people know the 2 reasons as to why we use a bee smoker when we're doing a bee inspection.
I didn't listen very well to the end. No, one of the reasons is that it makes the bees think that there is a bushfire, so they relax a little bit more. And the other reason is it covers the pheromones that they let off if they're not happy, so hopefully they won't know that we're here and therefore won't know where we are and want to attack us.
You've nailed it. So the bushfire theory is definitely the strongest theory at the moment, but what you'll see is when we use the smoke in the hive, it'll I guess send that message through, and the bees dive into the honey and start gorging themselves, and a bee that's eating honey is a lot happier than a bee that's not. So alright, so we'll get started. What we do is we just, now that we've got our smoker lit and it's blowing nice and full smoke, give it a few puffs in the entrance here. And we just let that sit for a little bit so that the smoke can go through it. I might actually give it another puff in the back here as well. And we'll let it sit. Now I know that we've had a few requests for honey, and we will be looking into that after we've done our brood inspection. But this time of the year I'm looking around and I know that the bees are bringing in lots of pollen. I was just looking at the front entrance just before, and there's loads of different colours of pollen, which is great. We'll know today if there's enough nectar in there for us to take it away. Like I said, it's a pantry up top. We just want to make sure that they're not running short on supplies. I know that it's been a little bit hard for us humans lately to get to the shop, so I hope our bees aren't also struggling. Now what I'm doing, I'm using my hive tool to break the seal of the brood box and the honey super. It's quite heavy, so that's a good sign. And I'm going to put it over on a stand over here because I don't want, I want to get straight down into the bottom. Just going to crack it, move it to the side so I can grab it, and I'm going to puff some smoke in the top here as well. Give that a second. How you doing, Miss Durie? How you feeling?
Yeah, good.
Very good. This is never a light job. It's quite full. Quite full, so that means that there's a fair bit of honey in there. So another puff of smoke, just where I couldn't reach them before, and we'll get straight into it. So I'll get you to stay there, and what I'll do is I'll bring some frames over so that I can show you what we're looking at. So here's that gate that I was talking about. This is our honey soup, our queen excluder gate, and it too is really well stuck down. Now the kids that come with me every week down here know that the bees have this amazing ability of collecting, I think it comes from tree saps and gear. It's called propolis, and it sticks things together like a really good sticky super glue. What I'm looking on this queen excluder is just to make sure that our queen hasn't come for the ride, and then I can set it aside. So I might grab the camera, or you can come up if you want, Sheridan.
That's all right.
Just show you what it looks like from the top. So this is an 8-frame brood super, and generally in the middle few frames here we'll find the queen laying with lots and lots of resources, and then on the outsides we'll see all of the stores. So we might like to see if there's honey out here, bits of pollen, and some baby bees and eggs inside. So I'll give it back to Sheridan and I'll bring out a couple of frames at a time. The bees seem quite happy today, and I can see lots and lots of bees already that are drinking up the nectar and the honey. And just like the queen excluder, all of our frames are stuck together with that propolis and wax. So I'm just walking through, or not walking through, I'm going through and snapping them clear, so that when I pull them out, I'm only pulling one frame out at a time. Otherwise I'll get some very upset bees. Rightio. Now what you guys can't see or smell, sorry, from where you're sitting is the beautiful smell of nectar, which is a good sign. So what I'm looking for now, I can see there's lots of pollen, there's brood of all stages, there's little grubs, so they look like grubs. I'll see if I can get that on camera. A fairly well good frame that's about to hatch out. So down in that corner there, can you see all the wax cappings? So underneath each of those cells is a baby bee that's about to hatch out. So that's down the bottom left hand corner. And then around the top, where it's glistening, that's our nectar that the bees, you can see some of them are drinking. And you might even catch a bee in the middle there with different coloured pollen on their legs. So there's white pollen, orange pollen that I can see. There's a few drone bees on that frame, which is a good sign of hive health. The drone bees are the boy bees, so I don't find the queen. It's important that I double check for the queen because I don't want to set this one down on beside the hive unless I'm certain I don't have the queen on. And the reason I've left it on the side is just so that it's bought me some space. So I might pull out a couple more frames and then take some questions. So I'll just grab the next frame. I was explaining to Miss Durie, I'm in full gloves today, but I like to normally use a different style of gloves because it lets me feel better through the hive. Another good looking frame, lots of pollen, which is exciting. Last time I came in the hive with the kids, there wasn't a lot of pollen. Lots and lots of pollen. So I'll show you the pollen. So over on that left hand side there, if you look down the cells, lots of different colours. You see the pollen in there?
Sure can.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of brood on this frame. It's either just hatched out or it hasn't been positioned to lay in yet. No queen on here, but over in this corner here there's different larvae, pupae stages as well. I might take a question. Is there any questions on the chat stream there, Miss Durie?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Mrs. Charnock says we're doing an awesome job.
There you go. Are they able to hear? I didn't know if they'd be able to hear us.
Can you hear us, Mrs. Charnock?
Lots and lots of bees.
I don't think they can
There's like
hear
a
us.
30-second delay, so when we ask for questions,
Oh.
it's going to take 30 seconds
All
for
right.
them to hear
Well,
us.
she can have.
I'll just grab one more frame out. And we're heading into the middle of the brood box. So this is a likely position for us to find a queen. Quite heavy with brood. This one's beautifully laid out. All about the pop. There's no queen cells. A few drones around the bottom. You can see the queen on this side. Absolutely chockers with these guys. You see the honey that's being capped around the top. We go up this frame. So remember those wax
There's
cappings?
a grumpy bee.
You've got one over near. You see all those wax cappings of bees that are about to hatch out? Takes 21 days from an egg that the queen lays to become a hatched out baby bee. So those ones that are capped over will be emerging in the next few days generally.
Mrs. Charnock says she can hear us, and Mrs. H says she has a question.
Okay.
How do you get different honey tastes?
That's a good question. So look, up in this corner here and around most frames I've been pointing out that nectar. But do you see the ones that have got the little light, almost white capping on top? That means that cell's completely filled with honey and has the right amount of water in it for it to be stored. So to go to Miss H's question, honey's retrieved from different floral sources in the environment. So it's called nectar when it's in the tree, and the bees collect that nectar and bring it back to the hive. Do a bit of a process where they're taking out the water content, and they do that while putting in some special enzymes and different parts. So depending on where it's collected, it influences the flavour. So I know that we've had a number of people comment about the school's honey when it's gone home, how it tastes different to the stuff that you buy in store, and that's, you know, very, very true. But as people have bought more and more, they've also realised that it tastes different than the time that they had it before. So the stuff in stores are kind of a combination of honey, so it's called what they call mixed blossom, so it's all mixed together. And the honey that we get out of our hives isn't necessarily from as many sources. So, you know, the honey that's collected off a clover looks and tastes very different than the honey that's collected off of the eucalyptus plant. I'm going to leave the brood box and we're going to have a look, seeing as we're asking about honey. We're going to go up top. Now, I haven't found the queen, but that's okay, because the kids will tell you that when we do an inspection, it's not necessary to find the queen. We just need to find evidence that the queen's been there. And because I found so many different stages of brood, I wasn't able to show you on the webcam the eggs that I found, but it does mean that the queen's been there before. So I'm confident that there's a queen in our hive, which is making me feel very happy about how these guys are going.
Well, you just answered Masani's question without even knowing it. She just said, have you seen the queen bee yet?
Yeah, so look, if we were to spend a little longer and to go through it, we would inevitably have a better chance of finding her. So there's an 8-frame hive. We went into 3 frames. It's possible that the queen was likely in one of those frames we didn't check, but it's also possible, because I didn't spend a long time looking, that she was on one of those frames I did check. So she's in there. I've seen evidence that she's in there. Instead of me poking through and going through the rest of the hive, I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. I'm going to leave them be, and we're going to check out the honey super. So I'm going to put the honey super on top so that it keeps the brood box nice and warm, and we'll just have a look at some of the honey that's sitting up there. So I'll just give it a bit of a smoke to encourage those bees that are on top. Go down, and before they all rise back up, I'll lift this guy over. So, looks very heavy. So that means that we've got a lot of honey.
Oh, good.
Which is a good sign. And it was only a week or 2 ago that we actually got honey out. So it means that there's some nectar definitely coming in. So what I might do, Sheridan, is I might show you the end frame. If you want to come around this way, the hives that we have are called flow hives, and they're designed with some windows in there that we can keep an eye on things that are going on. So down here, we've got a lot of the wax that the bees and propolis that the bees have used to stuck these down. This frame here looks really, really full, and it's a very dark coloured honey. This frame here looks like it's almost full. It's a very light coloured honey. So after answering that question about where the nectar comes from, it might explain why this is a different colour than this one. So it's looking quite full, definitely full in this frame. There's a couple of cells that it's not, but typically bees will fill it from the inside out. So if you see on the end that it's full like this, it means that there's a good chance that all the way through the frame, it's chockers with honey and is ready to get out. The only sure way of doing that is to crack it open and to have a look. So we'll just have a look up the top, and we might grab out one of the end frames that's not fully filled with honey yet, so that you can see the different stages of it. So I'll just get my smoker going again, open up our lid.
Lacey and Eli are wondering, why do bees eat honey?
That's a good question. So look, bees eat honey because it's their kind of the carbohydrate source. So it's not the only thing that they eat. They'll combine it with a couple of different, I guess, other sources of nutrition. So bees will eat protein in the form of pollen that's collected off the flowers, and they'll also eat the nectar and the honey that's stored in the beehive. So it's just their food. They don't have nearly as many, I guess, options of what they eat. They're vegetarians to begin with, and because of the way in which they've evolved, their diet consists of a combination of those things: different pollen sources and different nectar sources from, different nectar sources from different blooms. As I look around, I can see a crepe myrtle that's in bloom. This morning I noticed a bottle brush in bloom up in our garden. I don't see a lot of the gum trees in flower at the moment, but because it's autumn, I guess that probably isn't the time for all of them to be on. So we'll have a quick look in here now. I just peeked in before, and you can see that we've got a bit of mess up here. I'll show you this. It's not mess. This is some extra storage that the bees have created. It means that they've filled up their box at some point, and they've needed extra storage for their honey. So this here is just wax, and then when they've filled up their honey stores, they'll come up here and deposit more honey. So essentially, we'll leave it for a little bit. We might be able to crack them off, and I know that people get really excited when they have honeycomb mixed in with their honey. It can look and add a bit of an effect. So you can see there's lots and lots of bees up here still, but these stores at the moment aren't necessarily full. They're actually quite empty. Yeah. Are there any other questions on there, Miss Durie?
Kobe would like to know, how long is the queen bee?
How long is she? So she's a lot longer than the other bees, and I know that we showed. I know that we had a group. I can't remember if it was Kobe's the other day where we went into one of our nuke boxes, and because there's less frames in there, it's a lot easier to go through the whole box without creating as big of a disruption. Look, if I was to give it a measurement, it'd probably be, and they do vary, every queen is different, but maybe 1.5 times the length of a normal bee and a slightly wider body. So they're definitely distinct, and you can definitely notice when you find one. But they do vary. I've got all different shapes and colours of queen bees, and every beekeeper does the same. So I won't go through there because I can tell straight away that there's a lot of honeycomb up the top, which means that at some point they've run out of space. But what I might do, because we're running out of fuel in our smoker, is I might show you the observation window. Maybe I'll hold this one and I'll show you this. So again, because of the hives that we've got, I've got these little observation windows that people can look in without it being a disruption to the bees. So this one here is quite empty, as you can see. There is some nectar in the bottom of it, but it's not filled up yet. It's a bit blurrier. There it goes. But it's a cool thing to watch them fill this up and then put the wax capping on top. It's like a lid of a jar when it's full. There's some honey around here, or nectar. It's been turned into honey. And they work in that arc kind of fashion. Yeah. Did you have any questions, Sheridan?
No, I don't.
I'll leave that there. I'll give it back to... We'll make sure Miss Durie gets her face on camera.
Hi.
We'll hang around for another minute or two because I said that we'd do it for about half an hour and we're very close to that. If there are any questions for us, now's the time to ask. You can probably take a seat down there, Sheridan, and I'll just show you what the front of the hive looks like. And we're talking about the different types of pollen. If I can get it to focus, you might be able to see as bees are landing on the landing pad, the different colours of pollen. Do you see that bee that's moving a bit of pollen, yellow pollen right in the middle there? There's a bee there that's just landed with orange legs, so there's some orange pollen coming in. And just near us was a yellow one. So there's plenty and plenty of pollen coming in, and, you know, safe to assume with that honey super being so filled, there's also lots and lots of nectar. I'm just going to give that back to Sheridan. I'll shut up that lid. Last chance for questions, and then we'll bid you adieu until the next time.
Next question. How long does it take for a bee to hatch from the hive?
So that's a good question. I did mention it kind of in passing before. So there's 3 different types of bees that you can find in the hive. There's the worker bees, which are female bees. They do a bunch of different jobs, but the vast majority of those bees inside that hive are worker bees. They take 21 days from an egg that's been laid to hatch out. Roughly 21 days for them to be out and productive in the hive. For a drone bee, it's a little longer. Now, I may get this wrong, and I'm sure somebody on there might correct me if I do, but drone bees, which are the boy bees, and there were a few of them in there, really hard to kind of highlight them for you, but they're a much thicker looking bee with a lot, it looks like they're, really muscly, and they've got big giant eyes, but they generally run at about 10 to 20% of the hive will be boy bees if they're doing well. And they take a little longer, so about 28 days for them to hatch. Now here's the cool thing, the queen, because generally when they're hatching out queens, it's in a situation where they need to act fast, and they're fed different food, so they grow at a different rate. They only, from an egg to a hatched queen, is about 16 days. So 16, 21 and about 28, I think, if I've got the numbers right. So hopefully that answers your question. Now the next question that kids often ask, I'll answer it before somebody actually gets a chance to type it in, is how long do they live?
Oh, the queen. We've already got that question typed in. They've beaten you to it.
So the worker bees, it depends on the season and depends on how active they are. But, roughly around 40 days from when they've hatched out to when they expire. It differs, like I said, with how active they are. But this time of year, around 40 days for a worker bee in their entire life. For a queen, it can range. It can be between 1 and 5 years, but generally around 2 years worth of, activity for them. Queen bee's life is an interesting one in that often the way in which they end their life it's not through exhaustion, but a lot of the time it can be a hive's decision. If they're not doing a really good job, they can kick the queen out and they can terminate her and replace her, which is a bit brutal, but I guess it's important for the hive to have a really healthy laying queen, because without her in the hive, there's no baby bees to replace the worker bees that are going through, or the drone bees, and yeah, they don't last long as a colony without her doing the best she can. So drone bees, I think, can last a little longer. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. They might last a little longer than a worker bee, purely because they're not doing nearly as much activity. They might leave the hive twice a day to try and do a mating flight, and that's where they're looking, and they're using those big bee eyes to try and find, the queen at a distance in the air, and perform their mating ritual, I guess you could say. But yeah, so not long. Pretty crazy when you think about it. The queen definitely lives the longest if she's been mated well and is a productive queen. But the worker bee, is constantly at work. The moment that they hatch out of their cell, they're put straight to work in cleaning up their cell, and they go through a variety of jobs. And the kids will tell you that. Some of them are undertaker bees, some of them work as guard bees, some of them work as and an undertaker bee is a bee that takes dead bees out of the hive and moves them away, because they don't want the disease from a dead bee spreading in the hive. Through to nurse bees and foragers, which is typically the last thing that a bee gets to do. The oldest bees are the foragers, and they're the ones flying out of the hive to try and find the nectar. Are there any other questions, Miss Durie?
There are.
Oh, right.
Do you have a queen in both of those hives?
Yeah, so look, I didn't look in this hive, but the last time we did an bee inspection, we absolutely do have a queen in there. Judging by what's going in the front, you can assume if there's pollen and nectar going in, that they're using that pollen and nectar to raise brood. And if you've got baby bees, it means you've got a queen who's laying eggs. But to answer that question, without a doubt, you've got to have another, do a bee inspection in there. So yes, I'm confident that there's a queen in there. Yes, I'm very confident there's a queen in there. And these two nuke boxes are in very different stages. So they're a baby hive with small amounts of frames, where we use to raise up queens, just in case we end up losing a queen or a queen dies, and we can substitute them in as like a resource. So in this one, this one is a queenless hive. It tried to raise a queen the last couple of weeks, but as I was explaining to Miss Durie off camera, it appears that the queen didn't come back from her mating flight, which does happen. They'll fly out at a distance and then they'll have to navigate back, and there's a lot of other animals out there that enjoy a snack of a queen bee, birds included. So perhaps she's met her fate that way, or she could have got lost, in transit as well. And this one's just had a queen hatch out. So there's a virgin queen in there, hasn't completed the mating flight, and she looks very different than a fully laying queen, a lot shorter. But you can still tell it's a queen because of the way in which her abdomen and her thorax are shown. Getting a bit technical now, so I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, this might be technical. Mitch wants to know, how do the queens lay their eggs?
Okay, so each of those cells, those hexagonal cells, is a cavity, or like a mini cave. The queen bee is longer than a worker bee, so that they can reach down with they can reverse down and lay an egg out the end of their body. So the reason that they're longer is so that they can stretch down and place it nice and neatly on the bottom of the cell. And when an egg is laid, it's almost like a really small piece of rice that stands up. And as the egg progresses, and after 3 days the egg hatches, it slopes down, lays down, egg hatches, and you get the larvae. So it looks like a very small grub, and it swims and swims around in its hexagonal cell while other bees are feeding it food, and it'll grow and grow and grow. And the last part of its, hatching process is that it pupates. So it turns from a larvae into a bee, and it does that in a cocoon. So they put a wax cap or lid on, and it pupates from a grub to a bee underneath that wax capping. There's a really cool YouTube link. If you're interested in watching that, there's a time lapse that somebody's done, and you just type in egg to bee, and you can watch that 21-day process in, I think it goes for like 30 seconds. It's pretty cool.
And last question about the drone bees. What do the drones do?
So the drone bees are the boy bees. So their job is to do one thing, and they actually are quite lazy in the hive. They are often they annoy the girl bees to be fed, so they don't like going and getting food themselves. Sometimes they will do that if they have to, but they'll annoy the worker bees and say, feed me, feed me, feed me. So inside the hive they don't do very much at all. They might provide a bit of warmth to the hive itself, but their main job is to perform the mating or to pass on their genetics. So they do a mating flight, which is where they'll leave the hive twice a day if they're at the right age, and they're looking for an area where queen bees hang out, waiting for other bees to visit them. So, waiting for drone bees to arrive. So, it's a
sounds about typical, doesn't it?
Yeah. So they're hanging out for one job. And I don't know if the drone bees know it, but when they are successful and they do find a queen and they are able to pass on their genetics, the process of that ends up killing them. So, if they do their job well, they'll leave the hive one day and they won't come back. Okay?
And that's it. No
That'll
more
do us?
questions.
All right, no worries. Well, look, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the live stream. If there are any questions, you can leave them in the comments and I might be able to get back to them and answer. But thanks for joining us. And I know it's different to be at home watching this on YouTube rather than being at school and sitting with me in the hives. But I hope you had fun. Now I've got all bee hair. All right, see you guys.